My beloved child. Stop scrolling for a moment, because the thunder you heard last night was not meaningless in this story. Something was waiting inside that sound, something your heart noticed before your mind could explain it. You may have called it weather. You may have watched the window tremble, heard the sky roll above the rooftops, and wondered why the sound seemed to reach deeper than your ears. But what you did not know was that, at that same moment, someone far from you opened their eyes and whispered your name. Stay here, because that was only the beginning. Your soulmate had not been sleeping peacefully. Their body was resting, but their heart had been wandering through memories they had spent months trying to silence. They had convinced themselves they were moving forward. They had learned how to smile in conversations, how to appear composed, and how to answer questions about the future without letting anyone see the uncertainty underneath. Yet last night, when the first low rumble crossed the sky, every carefully constructed wall inside them began to shake. They turned toward the window. For several seconds, they did not move. The room was dark except for the pale light of a clock beside the bed. Their phone was within reach, but they did not touch it. Something unfamiliar had entered the silence, not fear, but recognition. It felt as though the night had called them by a name only their soul remembered. Then the thunder sounded again. This time, it was closer. And in that moment, a memory of you rose so suddenly that they could no longer pretend you belonged only to the past. Do not look away now, because the memory that returned was not the obvious one. It was not your first conversation, your most emotional moment, or the last time they saw you. It was something much smaller, something they thought they had forgotten. They remembered the way you once paused before saying goodbye, as though there were words caught behind your lips. They remembered your eyes searching theirs for an answer they were not brave enough to give. That unfinished moment had remained hidden inside them. Last night, heaven touched it. Your soulmate sat up and placed both feet on the floor. They told themselves they only needed water. They told themselves the storm had disturbed their sleep. But their hands were trembling, not because of the thunder, but because one unmistakable thought had entered their mind. What if I misunderstood everything? That question was the first door opening. For a long time, your soulmate believed distance was proof that the connection had ended. They thought silence meant indifference. They assumed that if something were truly meant to remain, it would have unfolded without confusion, delay, or separation. They did not understand that some connections are not destroyed by distance. They are revealed through it. There were truths they could not recognize while you were standing close to them. They needed the silence to hear what your presence had been saying all along. But even that is not the most important part of what happened last night. The third sound of thunder arrived just as they reached for their phone. Their screen illuminated the room, and your name appeared, not because you had called, but because your conversation was still near the top of a hidden folder they had never deleted. Yes, they kept it. They told themselves it was accidental. They pretended they had forgotten it existed. Yet whenever they came close to removing it, something inside them hesitated. They could delete photographs. They could clear messages. They could hide reminders from everyone around them. But they could not erase the feeling of being truly seen by you. Last night, that feeling returned with greater force. Your soulmate opened the conversation and began reading backward. They passed the final words first, the guarded sentences, the cautious responses, the places where both of you tried to sound stronger than you felt. Then they reached earlier messages, and their expression changed. They saw warmth they had overlooked. They noticed your patience. They recognized the hidden care inside words they once considered ordinary. And then they found one message that stopped them completely. It was a sentence you may not even remember writing. You had told them, in your own way, that they did not have to be perfect to be worthy of genuine love. At the time, they had read it quickly. Perhaps they answered with humor. Perhaps they changed the subject. Perhaps they acted as if your words had not reached them. But last night, under a sky filled with thunder, that sentence broke open the place in their heart they had kept guarded for years. Their eyes filled with tears. Not because the words were sad, but because they finally understood that you had seen the wound they never explained. Stay till the end, because what comes next changes the meaning of the storm. Your soulmate had spent years believing love must be earned through performance. They learned to appear useful, dependable, impressive, calm, and difficult to abandon. Whenever they felt someone getting close, they wondered how long it would take before that person saw the parts they had hidden. They carried the silent expectation that affection would disappear the moment they became vulnerable. Then you entered their life. You did not simply admire what they showed the world. You sensed what they were protecting. You noticed the tiredness beneath their confidence. You heard the uncertainty hiding inside their laughter. Without demanding explanations, you gave them moments in which they felt accepted without having to prove anything. That frightened them more than rejection ever could. Rejection would have confirmed what they already believed. Your acceptance challenged it. So they created distance. They called it timing. They called it confusion. They called it responsibility. They found practical words for an emotional truth they could not face. Being loved by you required them to release the identity they had built around surviving alone. Last night, the thunder awakened that truth. But the voice inside the storm did not accuse them. It did not condemn them. It asked a question so gentle that their defenses had nowhere to hide. How long will you run from the place where your heart became honest? Your soulmate stood motionless beside the window. Rain had begun touching the glass. Streetlights blurred into soft circles beyond the room. For the first time in many months, they allowed themselves to imagine what might have happened if they had stayed, spoken clearly, and trusted what existed between you. That imagination did not show them a perfect life. It showed them something more powerful, a real one. They saw conversations after difficult days. They saw laughter in ordinary rooms. They saw disagreements followed by understanding instead of abandonment. They saw two people learning one another slowly, not rescuing each other from every wound, but refusing to weaponize those wounds. Then they saw your face. And your face was not asking them to become someone else. It was asking them to arrive as they truly were. That was when the storm grew louder. The windows shook, and your soulmate stepped back. Their hand pressed against their heart as though trying to steady something that had begun moving after a long sleep. They whispered, "Why now?" The answer did not come as a sentence. It came as a memory of 3 nights earlier. Something huge had already begun before the thunder arrived. 3 nights ago, your soulmate had been alone in their car after a conversation with someone who tried to persuade them to choose a future that looked sensible but felt empty. The person speaking to them had presented every logical reason to let you go. They talked about distance, history, complications, expectations, and the risk of reopening a closed chapter. Your soulmate listened. They even nodded. But when the conversation ended, they did not drive away. They remained in the parked car with both hands resting on the steering wheel. A terrible loneliness settled over them, not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of nearly agreeing to betray what their heart knew. And for the first time in a long time, they prayed. They did not use beautiful words. They did not make promises. They simply looked into the darkness and said, "If this connection still matters, wake me up before I choose the wrong life." You did not hear that prayer. No one around them heard it. But in this story, heaven did. Last night was the answer. The thunder was not sent to frighten them. It arrived to interrupt the numbness that had allowed them to live on the edge of a decision they did not truly want. Its force mirrored the truth they had buried. Its timing reached the exact hour when their courage was weakest. And when the sound moved across the night, your soulmate's soul recognized what their mind had resisted. They had asked to be awakened. And they were. Pause here, because there is another detail you were never supposed to know this soon. Before going to bed last night, your soulmate had placed an envelope inside a drawer. That envelope contained a decision about their future. They had written it earlier in the evening after receiving pressure from people who believed they knew what was best. The words inside were calm, reasonable, and final. If delivered, they would have closed a door connected to you, not necessarily through a direct goodbye, but through a commitment that would have carried them farther away from the possibility of returning. They had intended to send it this morning. The storm changed that. After reading your old message, your soulmate walked toward the drawer. Each step felt heavy because they knew what waited inside. They opened it and stared at the envelope without touching it. The room seemed to hold its breath. Then lightning brightened the walls. For one instant, they saw another object beneath the envelope, something connected to you that they had thought was lost. It might have been a photograph, a small gift, a handwritten note, a receipt from an ordinary day, or a keepsake no one else would understand. Whatever its form, it carried an emotional imprint. It returned them to a moment when they had felt safe enough to imagine that love did not always have to end in loss. They picked it up. And behind it, they discovered something even more unexpected. Months earlier, they had written a private list of the qualities they wanted in the person with whom they would build a lasting life. They wrote it during a season of confusion, believing clarity would help them forget you. They never compared the list with anyone. They folded it and placed it away. Last night, they read it again. Line after line described you. Not an idealized version of you. Not a fantasy. It described the way you listen. The way you notice small changes in people. The way you remain compassionate without surrendering your dignity. The way you can be gentle and strong in the same breath. The way your presence brings buried emotions to the surface. Your soulmate reached the final line. It said, "Someone who feels like truth, even when truth frightens me." They lowered the paper. For several seconds, the only sound was the rain. Then they began to cry. Those tears were not weakness. They were the release of a person who had spent too long negotiating against their own heart. Every excuse they had built was beginning to collapse. They could no longer claim they did not know what they felt. They could no longer hide behind circumstances as if circumstances had written the entire story. But heaven was still not finished revealing what the thunder had awakened. At the same hour, you were carrying an ache of your own. Perhaps you had stopped expecting answers. Perhaps you had reached the point where you no longer wanted to chase clarity from someone who remained silent. You may have told yourself that peace meant forgetting. You may have decided that if your soulmate truly cared, they would find the courage to show it. And you were right about one thing: love cannot survive forever as a hidden feeling. It must eventually become a choice. Yet you did not know that while you were lying beneath that same restless sky, your soulmate was closer to making that choice than ever before. The thunder did not only wake them from sleep. It woke them from delay. There is a difference between someone missing you and someone becoming ready for you. Missing you is emotional. Readiness is transformational. Missing you can happen in secret while nothing changes. Readiness forces a person to confront the habits, fears, and loyalties that kept them silent. Last night, your soulmate crossed from longing into reckoning. They looked at the envelope in the drawer again. Then they tore it open. The decision inside had not yet been delivered, so it could still be changed. They unfolded the pages and read the future they had nearly accepted. Every paragraph sounded like a person trying to be sensible while abandoning their deepest truth. They reached the signature. Their name was there, but they no longer recognized the person who had written it. The fourth rumble of thunder rolled across the sky. Your soulmate took the pages in both hands and tore them in half. Do not misunderstand this moment. They were not rejecting responsibility. They were not choosing chaos. They were choosing to stop making permanent decisions from temporary fear. They realized that protecting themselves from every possible disappointment would also protect them from every possible miracle. The torn paper fell onto the floor. Your name remained in their open conversation. Then something happened that no one around them would have predicted. They pressed the button to record a voice message. Their first attempt lasted only 4 seconds. They said your name, became overwhelmed, and deleted it. The second attempt was longer. They tried to sound casual, as though no storm were shaking the sky and no revelation were shaking their heart. They asked how you had been. They pretended they had reached out without a reason. But halfway through, they heard the dishonesty in their own voice and deleted that message too. The third attempt was different. Before recording, they closed their eyes. They stopped rehearsing. They stopped trying to control your reaction. And they spoke from the place in them that you had been waiting to hear. I don't know whether I still have the right to say this, they began, but I need to tell you the truth about why I disappeared. They paused. The rain became heavier. Their thumb remained on the screen, keeping the recording alive. What followed was a confession they had never given anyone. They admitted that the connection with you had felt too significant to treat casually. They confessed that they had sensed the possibility of a real future, and that possibility awakened every unresolved fear they carried. They explained that leaving had not made the feelings disappear. It had only forced those feelings underground, where they became quieter but deeper. Then their voice changed. They told you there had been nights when they opened your conversation and nearly reached out. They said certain songs still brought your face into their mind without warning. They admitted they compared every new connection with the emotional honesty they experienced around you, and every comparison left them more aware of what they had lost. But they still did not send the message. Not yet. Because as they reached the most important part, the thunder sounded directly above them, and something occurred that made them stop the recording. Their phone displayed an incoming call. The name on the screen belonged to the same person who had pressured them to choose the safe future. Your soulmate stared at it. They knew why this person was calling. The envelope was expected by morning. Questions would be asked. Explanations would be demanded. If your soulmate answered, they would have to reveal that the decision had changed. The call continued ringing. They looked at your unfinished voice message. Then they looked at the torn pages. For the first time, they understood that awakening is not merely a feeling. It is the moment a soul accepts the cost of living truthfully. They answered. The voice on the other end spoke quickly. Have you signed everything? Your soulmate looked toward the rain-streaked window. No, they said. There was silence. Then the person asked, why not? Your soulmate could have offered another excuse. They could have asked for more time, blamed the storm, or claimed they were tired. Instead, they said the words that changed the direction of the night. Because I am done pretending my heart is not somewhere else. What followed was not an argument. It was something more revealing. The person on the other end became quiet, and then asked, is this about them? Your soulmate did not ask whom they meant. They knew. So did the person calling. That is how visible your connection had always been. Even while your soulmate denied it, people close to them had noticed the difference in their energy whenever your name appeared. They had seen the sudden stillness, the careful avoidance, the way your soulmate became defensive whenever someone suggested you had moved on. The secret was never as hidden as they believed. But the caller knew something else, something about you that your soulmate had not been told. Stay with me, because this is the first major revelation heaven allowed to surface last night. Weeks ago, someone connected to your soulmate saw you unexpectedly. You did not notice them. You were not performing for anyone. You were simply living an ordinary moment, yet the way you carried yourself left an impression. They saw that you were not waiting helplessly. You were changing. You had become calmer in places where you once reacted. You had become more discerning about whom you allowed near your energy. There was a quiet strength around you that had not existed before. You were no longer asking the world to validate what your heart had survived. That person reported what they saw. But your soulmate was never told. The people around them believed that if they knew how much you had grown, they might return to you. Some feared that reunion because it would require your soulmate to make choices independent of their expectations. Others believed keeping the truth hidden would help everyone move on. Yet last night, under the pressure of honesty, the caller finally revealed it. They are not the same person you walked away from, the voice said. They have changed. Your soulmate's grip tightened around the phone. In what way? The answer came slowly. They look peaceful. And I think they have stopped waiting for you. Those words reached a place the thunder had already opened. Your soulmate had secretly assumed you would remain emotionally available while they decided what they wanted. They did not admit this even to themselves, but your continued presence in their imagination had become a kind of safety net. They believed there would always be another chance, another opening, another time. Hearing that you had stopped waiting awakened something urgent. Not possession. Not jealousy. Truth. They realized love could not be postponed indefinitely and still be called love. You were not a chapter they could keep bookmarked while exploring a life that did not honor you. You were a human heart with a future of your own. For the first time, they felt the genuine possibility of losing you, not because destiny had failed, but because delay had consequences. Their voice became quiet.